Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Bob Newhart. George Robert Bob Newhart is an American stand-up comedian and actor. Noted for his deadpan and slightly stammering delivery, Newhart came to prominence in the 1960s, when his album of comedic monologues The Button-Down Mind of Bob Newhart became a worldwide bestseller, and reached #1 on the Billboard pop album chart. It remains the 20th best-selling comedy album in history. The follow-up album, The Button-Down Mind Strikes Back, was also a massive success, and the two albums held the Billboard #1 and #2 spots simultaneously. Newhart later went into acting, starring as Chicago psychologist Dr. Robert Hartley in The Bob Newhart Show during the 1970s, and then as Vermont innkeeper Dick Loudon on the 1980s series Newhart. He also had two short-lived sitcoms in the 1990s titled Bob and George and Leo. Newhart also appeared in film roles such as Major in Catch-22 and Papa Elf in Elf. He provided the voice of Bernard in the Walt Disney animated films The Rescuers and The Rescuers Down Under. In 2004, he played the library head Judson in The Librarian, a character which continued in 2014 to the TV series The Librarians. In 2013, Newhart made his first of 4 guest appearances on The Big Bang Theory as Professor Proton, for which he received his first Primetime Emmy Award on September 15, 2013. Early life. Newhart was born on September 5, 1929, in Oak Park, Illinois. His parents were George David Newhart, a part owner of a plumbing and heating supply business, and Juliet Pauline, a housewife. His mother was of Irish descent and his father was of English, Irish and German ancestry. One of his grandmothers was from St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Newhart has 3 sisters, Virginia, Mary Joan, and Pauline. Newhart was educated at Roman Catholic schools in the Chicago area, including St. Catherine of Siena Grammar School in Oak Park, and attended St. Ignatius College Prep. Graduating in 1947, he then enrolled at Loyola University of Chicago, from which he graduated in 1952 with a bachelor's degree in business management. Newhart was drafted into the United States Army and served in the United States during the Korean War as a personnel manager until being discharged in 1954. Newhart briefly attended Loyola University Chicago School of Law, but did not complete a degree. In part, he says, because he was asked to behave unethically during an internship. Career. After the war, Newhart got a job as an accountant for United States Gypsum. He later said that his motto, "That's close enough," and his habit of adjusting petty cash imbalances with his own money shows he did not have the temperament to be an accountant. He also said he was a clerk in the unemployment office who made $55 a week, but who quit upon learning unemployment benefits were $45 a week and he only had to come in to the office 1 day a week to collect it. Comedy albums. In 1958, Newhart became an advertising copywriter for Fred A. Niles, a major independent film and television producer in Chicago. It was here that he and a co-worker would entertain each other with long telephone calls about absurd scenarios, which they would later record and send to radio stations as audition tapes. When his co-worker ended his participation, Newhart continued the recordings alone, developing the shtick which was to serve him well for decades. In addition to his various stand-up bits, He incorporated that shtick into his television series at appropriate times. The auditions led to his first recording contract. A disc jockey at a radio station, Dan Sorkin, who later became the announcer's sidekick on his NBC series, introduced Newhart to the head of talent at Warner Brothers Records, which signed him in 1959, only a year after the label was formed based solely on those recordings. He expanded his material into a stand-up routine, which he began to perform at nightclubs. Newhart became famous mostly on the strength of his audio releases, in which he became the world's first solo, straight man. Newhart's routine was to portray one end of a conversation, playing the comedic straight man, and implying what the other person was saying. His 1960 comedy album, The Button-Down Mind of Bob Newhart, was the first comedy album to make on the Billboard charts. Button-Down Mind received the 1961 Grammy Award for Album of the Year. The album peaked at in the UK Albums Chart. Newhart also won Best New Artist. Newhart told a 2005 interviewer for PBS's American Masters that his favorite stand-up routine is Abe Lincoln vs. Madison Avenue, which appears on this album. In the routine, a slick promoter has to deal with the reluctance of the eccentric president to agree to efforts to boost his image. The routine was suggested to Newhart by Chicago TV director and future comedian Bill Daly, who would be Newhart's castmate on the 1970s The Bob Newhart Show for CBS. Newhart became known for using an intentional stammer in service to his unique combination of politeness and disbelief at what he was supposedly hearing. Newhart has used the delivery throughout his career. The follow-up album, The Button-Down Mind Strikes Back, was released 6 months later, and won Best Comedy Performance Spoken Word that same year. Subsequent comedy albums include Behind the Button-Down Mind of Bob Newhart, The Button-Down Mind on TV, Bob Newhart Faces Bob Newhart, The Windmills Are Weakening, This Is It, Best of Bob Newhart, and Very Funny Bob Newhart. Years later he released Bob Newhart Off the Record, The Button-Down Concert, and Something Like This, an anthology of his 1960s Warner Brothers albums. On December 10, 2015, it was revealed by publicist and comedy album collector Jeff Abraham that a lost Newhart track from 1965 about Paul Revere existed on a one-of-a-kind acetate, which he owns. The track made its world premiere on episode 163 of the Comedy on Vinyl podcast. Thank you for watching. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Please like and subscribe below. Please like and subscribe below.